Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Fab Unofficial. In this video, I'm going to be touching on and discussing 5 cards that I feel are underutilized currently in deck building and in the game, and 5 cards that I really feel are probably undervalued from where they should be and just unexplored. There's a lot more that can be done with them, and they probably should see a little bit more play than they do. But yeah, before we get into it, I do want to say a massive thank you to everybody that has subscribed and watched my other videos. I made the decision to get back into YouTube a little bit over a week ago. I really felt like after coming back from the World Champs, this was sort of the direction I wanted to head, and I really wanted to commit to being a part of this community and being involved as much as possible, and that this YouTube channel was the best outlet for that. So thank you to everybody that subscribed already and watched the videos. It's been really cool to see. So yeah, but let's get stuck into it. So now I have 5 cards that I want to talk about briefly, but before we get started, I do have an honorable mention. I don't want to be the YouTuber that harps on about the same thing over and over again, but I do have to give them a shout out, as it's probably the card that fits the bill for this sort of segment the best. I should say cards, because it is 2, but I have already talked about them in one of my other videos, so I didn't want to spend too much time on them. But that is Moonwish and Sunkiss, 2 cards that came to us from Arcane Rising, so only the 2nd set. So I do feel like they might have missed a few people, just simply because so many people have joined this game from, starting at Tales of Aria and so on. But yeah, Moonwish and Sunkiss is a little 2-card combo that I feel was massively underexplored, basically because it's so powerful when you can get it off. It's surprising that it hasn't seen more play. But yeah, Moonwish is an attack action. It represents a proper breakpoint, which I refer to as a proper breakpoint because it's coming in for 5, so it gets around the 1 card sink below Fate Foreseen defense reaction block. Now it does cost 2, but it has an alternate casting cost, so you can put a red back on top of your deck. So even in like an all red hand, it is still playable, and it's always going to be a 2 card attack. But its ability is when it hits, you get to search your deck for a card named Sunkiss, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your deck. Now, Sunkiss is an action, 0 cost, gains 3 life, but if you've played a card named Moonwish this turn, you draw a card and Sunkiss gains go again. So obviously you can tell Moonwish doesn't have go again of its own accord. So to really make the most out of this combination, you want to play it with other cards that allow you to give the Moonwish go again, or that get you extra action points. Something like a Time Snap Potion is really cool, and actually is a card that's very powerful and leads into one of the other cards I want to talk about later on in this video. But even at its base, if you can't gain the action point, Moonwish threatens an on-hit that gains you an extra card, right? Very similar to Snatch in that way. Snatch is 0 cost for 4, which is obviously a better rate, but very often the play with Snatch you'll see is people end the chain. No cards in hand, no cards in arsenal, and you're representing an on-hit at a break point that's going to get you an extra card, an extra value to carry on into next turn. Now, Moonwish is very similar in that even without the action point, you can still represent a relevant on-hit. So I think it's super powerful and very underexplored. Obviously, I have loved it playing it in my Dromai build, as you have access to things like Chromai and the ability to gain extra action points, but I do feel like it has a place in other decks. So yeah, I'm interested to see what people do with it moving forward. But yeah, that's the honorable mention, and we can move into the other cards. Now, I do want to preface all of these cards saying it's like some cards obviously do see play, some of the cards on this list, but this list is more cards that I think should probably get a bigger look at than they do. And if the Wounded Bull extravaganza that's been going on has taught us anything, it's that there's a ton of room for deck building and card consideration that's super underexplored in this game already, right? Nobody was playing Wounded Bull before Michael Hamilton put in his Icelander deck, and like, to be fair, as soon as he did it, it made perfect sense, right? It's 2 cards for 8. It's great value and great rate. Now, that card makes sense because of the way that he was looking at it, just on pure value. But for me, what I'm more interested in is that card stayed undiscovered all the way up through multiple sets until he started playing it. So it sort of leads me to believe, it's like, what else are we missing? What else is there? What other stones are left unturned? But so we'll start off with the 5th card. These are in no particular order, but this card is definitely, it's not unturned. This card is Remembrance, so it's a generic instant, yellow pitch, 0 cost, and it simply reads shuffle up to 3 action cards from your graveyard into your deck, and then banish Remembrance. Now, some of you, most of you probably know this card, right? It does see some play, but the reason it's on this list, for me, is I feel like it probably should see more play than it does, because it's an endgame in a bottle. Like, it's a single card endgame. Right, we're seeing, especially with the release of Dynasty, we're seeing a lot, very key cards with very high ceiling. Something like Invoke Soraya is an example of this from Prism. Right, you only get one of them, but the ability and what it does is such high value that ultimately you kind of if you could, you would want to do that as many times in the game as possible. Right, if you look at a hero like Azalea, Red in the Ledger is a very strong card. Maybe it's best on hit, and is kind of what you want to be doing against a lot of what's going on in the metagame. Now, you only get 3 of them. Now, if you could play 6, 9, 12 of them, you probably would. And that's where Remembrance sort of comes in. It is an endgame in the bottle because it allows you to get 6, 9, up to 12 use cases out of your most important cards. Pretty simple. You play out the 3 normally. Throughout the game, you're pitching Remembrance, and then when the 3 cards you care about the most in a certain matchup are in your graveyard and you see the Remembrance, you're able to shuffle them back in. And the big point is, it's just action cards. It doesn't matter whether it's attack actions or non-attack actions. The only thing you can't get is instants and defense reactions. But the most relevant cards outside of something like Art of War tend to be actions anyway. So yeah, I think we probably should see Remembrance in a few more lists, and I would, for a lot of people just getting into the game or just starting to sort of break into the competitive play, deck building can be hard and card decisions can be really tough to make when you're unsure of what you're going to be seeing and playing against. Remembrance is an endgame in the bottle. It's really easy to sort of fit a singular copy into your deck. And yeah, it does mean that you have a plan into any strategies that you think might take you long and might come down to fatigue. So definitely, yeah, give it a look. It's not for every deck, but I definitely think it probably sees a little less play than it should. And it's actually a card I think LSS will have their eye on. Not because it's broken, but simply because it maybe restricts deck building a little bit too much, right? People don't have to get creative because, if we're in a format where control and fatigue decks are really big, Remembrance is an easy inclusion and really sort of, takes out the intricacies of trying to find an end game when you have something that's really simple, plays well, and you kind of just easily get to do your most powerful thing over and over again. But yeah, first card on the list, Remembrance. Now, the second card is Knick-Knack Breakabrack. So this is a generic action, came to us from Everfest, so a more recent set. More of you will probably be aware of this. It's a 3-cost red, only blocks 2, and it reads, as an additional cost to play Knick-Knack Breakabrack, you may destroy any number of copper, silver, and or gold you control. And then you search your deck for a card with Amulet, Potion, or Talisman in its name, put it into the arena, then shuffle your deck. But for each 4 copper, 2 silver, or 1 gold destroyed in this way, you get to repeat this process, right? So put simply, if you don't destroy anything, you're going to pitch a blue, play Knick-Knack Breakabrack, and then go get a potion or like a singular amulet from your deck. But if you have any copper or silver or gold, you can go get multiple. Now, this card probably was made famous it's become a bit of a meme, I guess. Tarek Patel, before one of the Pro Tours, released an article or a tweet, or I don't even know what it was, to be honest, but it was a chain deck that included Knick-Knack, Breakabrack, and he got a little bit of slack for it. Now, probably more slack than he deserved, because I actually kind of agreed with his thought process, right? Its inclusion was for a specific use case in a matchup where what you really wanted to do was create an end game or a singular turn where you went really, really big. So the ability to tutor up and set up potions was really, really important for that turn. And Knick-Knack, Breakabrack just became a tutor card. Now, funny name, funny art, whatever. But really, it's just a card that allows you to set up the other important cards that you need to win a game. And that seems pretty good to me. Now, Everfest also brought us a ton of new amulets, potions, and talismans, one of which is actually on my list coming up. But for me, this card is totally underexplored for a generic tutor. So big. I've actually looked at it in Dromai. The 3 casting cost makes it a little bit tougher in that deck, but the ability to put a time snap potion into play early is huge. Fetching energy pots, whatever it is. Yeah, I think there's some really, really cool things that can be done with this card, simply because what it tutors up is onboard value that you get to carry through to whatever turn you want to use it. And one of the key tenets of this game is that your resources reset, essentially. Outside of your arsenal, they tend to reset, but some of the most powerful things you can do is anything that allows you to carry value over into the next turn. Dash does this with counters on its items. Illusionist does this with auras or dragons in play. And sort of the catch-all answer, which every hero has access to for this, is things like leaving potions and talismans and amulets on the board for later turns. And Knick-Knack, Breakabrack is an option to do this in any deck. So I definitely think, take a look at it. It's really, really cool, and I hope that I see it running around a little bit more. But yeah. Now, the third card. I told you I had an amulet on this list, or at least an item of some kind. Now, this is Amulet of Ignition. So it is a yellow, 0 cost. It has Go Again, and it's an action item, and it has an ability. So it's an instant ability where you destroy Amulet of Ignition, and then the next ability you activate this turn costs 1 less. Now, the catch is you can only activate this ability if you haven't played a card or activated an ability this turn. So you have to do it first. Essentially, if this is in play and you want to use it at the start of your turn before you do everything else, you have to sacrifice this, and it carries over from there. Now, a lot of these amulets and talismans from Everfest really haven't been given a look. They don't see play, and James White is actually quoted as saying, it's like, you will want these down the road, right? Now, I feel like cards like this really suffer from the new way people are looking into Fab and building decks, the sort of Michael Hamilton maths equation, value matrix. This is one card for essentially 1, right? Or 0.3. It represents a resource technically. But where this becomes super interesting is, unlike something like Energy Potion, which is probably a comparison, is this card has Go Again, right? Energy Potion, which is another item that cracks for 2 resources, it doesn't have Go Again itself, right? So you either have to play it at the end of a chain after you've played other cards, or it becomes your entire turn. Now, that's not the case with Amulet of Ignition. Obviously, it has Go Again, so you can put this in play and do something else on your turn, and then have the amulet set up for down the road, which I think is a big difference. Now, not every deck is going to be able to make use of its activated ability. It's not 2 resources, and you can't use the reduction to play a card. But some of you will know that weapon swings are an activated ability, that you do activate an ability to attack. So a really good example is something like Rosetta Thorn, right? Represents 4 damage on board for a resource. Now, Amulet of Ignition, at the start of your turn, if you know you're going to want to swing Rosetta Thorn, you can activate, sack Amulet of Ignition, go about your turn, and then even if you don't have any resources left in your pool, you can swing with Rosetta Thorn because it now costs you 0. The 1 resource it did cost has been reduced to 0 through the amulet. I've mucked around with this in Dromai, an example like for the use with Flamescale Furnace, right? If you can start the turn, you know, sack off the amulet, you're pitching into, you know, maybe you attack with the Chromai, do something where you then have a red pitch in your yard as well, but you don't have the extra card. The Amulet of Ignition allows you to activate the Flamescale Furnace to follow up with something else, right? But yeah, super interesting card. I do think it's, again, it's part of a cycle of cards that's probably underexplored. This is the one that intrigues me the absolute most. You guys can, you know, deep dive into all the different activated abilities and things it could be used on. The use cases are kind of endless, but yeah, definitely a card that I think could see more play moving on, and probably should now. Okay, here we go. This is we go, and you'll notice like a lot of these cards are older, and I don't know if that's just how it is. Like it's just a, you know, an outcome from, you know, these sets being less known and new players sometimes not even existing, that knowing that these cards exist. But yeah, the next card on the list is Last Ditch Effort. Now, we talked about Remembrance being an end game in the bottle. This is, it's an end game for sure. So the reason why I think this card is totally undervalued is, at its worst, it is a blue pitch block 3 that can go into any deck. Now that's already pretty good, right? What you want from your blues is them to block 3, and the fact that this card is super relevant as games go late is just makes it even better. Now, you guys will be aware if you've played any games, you know, everybody watching is probably at varying levels, but naturally it's better value for you to pitch blue cards to pay for cards, as you get 3 resources. So if you're doing multiple cards, it allows you to pay for multiple things off a single card, right? So what that means is, because they're also lower rate to actually play from your hand, is as the game goes on and your resources whittle down, you get to a point where your deck is filled with more and more blues. Now, Last Ditch Effort is a way to actually utilize that and make use of it in an endgame scenario. So Last Ditch Effort, blue pitch block 3, cost 3, and it's an attack action coming in for 4, but it reads, when you play Last Ditch Effort, if you have no cards in your deck, it gains +4 and go again. So a real easy example of what this can do is, you're whittling down your resources, you get to an end game fatigue state where you have, you know, you arsenal this card and you draw up your final hand. Hopefully you've set it up so it has multiple Last Ditch Efforts, but if those are blues, you get to go pitch a blue, Last Ditch Effort for 8 with go again, and if you have a second, you can do the same again. So you're coming for 8, 16, and then with a single card left over, obviously it's pretty easy to just swing a weapon for whatever value that is from whatever hero that you're playing. Now, it sees next to no play outside of maybe Bravo, which doesn't make sense to me, right? As I said, but worst case, blue pitch block 3. Now, yeah, people are trying to do all kinds of fancy things, and obviously the metagame speeds up and slows down based on what decks are in it. Obviously Fi and Briar, and moving forward, probably the Katsu builds speed the metagame up a little bit. They're aggressive, and so will you ever get to an end game where you want Last Ditch Effort? Probably not. But in those matchups, it still blocks 3, so it's perfectly fine. Where it really shines is in the matchups like Oldham and Bravo, and anything that's going to fatigue and go longer, and the ability to have your resources whittled down, and then on the final turn, as the card says, as a Last Ditch Effort, you get to represent a turn that's massively above rate in a situation where usually you only need to push a few points across. So really big. I've played with this card a bunch. I really, really like it. But yeah, if you're looking for something a little spicy to, you know, finish your opponent off, definitely try some last-ditch effort combos and, you know, turn setups. It's really, really fun to play, and I actually think quite good. Now, the final card, if I can pull this up, which I want to talk about, which is massively underutilized, is Arena's Prayer. Right? So we've got another instant on our hands. So Arena's Prayer is and it comes in a cycle, but generally you only really want to play the reds because it's the best value. But it's a 1-cost generic instant where you reveal the top card of your deck, and then you prevent the next X arcane damage that would be dealt to you this turn, where X is 6 minus the pitch value of the card you revealed this way. Right? So this card's really, really interesting. So a couple things that I want to touch on and sort of break down and talk about is one, it's way better when you can manipulate the top or follow your pitch stack or know what's coming, right? Or you know, if it's something that you want to play early on in a deck that's playing a higher red count. Again, Dramai is a really good example of that, right? But essentially, you just want to work the numbers. So more often than not, Arena's Prayer is revealing a red from the top of your deck, because then it's kind of the best case scenario. If you compare it to something like Oasis Respite, it's the best case scenario Oasis Respite, right? Like you get the 5 points from this right off the bat. Now, where it differs from a lot of what is going on and available outside of this card is it's prevent the next X arcane damage that would be dealt to you this turn. So that's really, really key, right? So it doesn't target a specific source or a specific card. Something like Ward or Oasis Respite, you have to point it at a specific card. So, you know, as an example, if you Oasis Respite a Waning Moon, it is irrelevant whether you know, it prevents the 5 or the 3 or whatever. It just prevents it from that source. So you actually lose out on 2 points of value from that prevention. Now, or, you know, 2 or 1, or it depends how much the Waning Moon's coming in for. But with Arena's Prayer, if you play that in response to the Waning Moon, it's going to prevent all 2 or 3 of that, and then the additional cards. So normally what happens is, and I think this card's gotten way, way better and probably should see more play simply because of the popularity of Icelander. But in CC, when they Aether Ice Vein you, just trying to remember the name for a second, Aether Ice Vein you can respond with the Arena's Prayer. If you reveal the red, it's going to threaten to prevent all 5 of the damage from that source. Now, they can respond with the Waning Moon and soak up 3 of that, but then you also have the option to soak up the rest of the Aether Ice Vein with the Prayer, and then you still have options like Arcane Barrier and so on. But really, really interesting card. Now, obviously, the fact that there is a chance you could hit a blue off the top and this be not so good is always there. But I think there's a lot of decks that are really red heavy that probably should be playing this card over Oasis Respite, specific because of the matchups you want it in anyway. Like, it's really good against something like Kano, which again sort of comes in and out of popularity. But yeah, really, really cool card. I definitely think it should see more play. I think, you know, people like their new toys. So Oasis Respite, obviously people jumped on at a moment's notice, and you know, there's a little less flexibility with Arena's Prayer, but in the spots where it's good, it's, to me, way better than the other options out there. And I've had it in my sideboard and a few of my decks over the last couple of weeks, and I really, really like it into Icelander. So I would recommend giving it a try, as long as you can manipulate or sort of have the numbers on your side for the reveal from the top of your deck. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, those are the cards, the 5 cards, and I guess 7 if you count Moonwish and Sunkiss, that I feel are kind of underrated right now and definitely should be seeing more play. Now, that's just 5 to 7 that I picked. There's a ton of room in this game and undiscovered gems. So I would say take a deep dive, head to FabDB, whatever search engine is your choice. It's available on Fab TCG. You can see the breakdowns of all the card sets, and have a deep dive and actually look at some of these older cards and get creative with your deck building. One, it's a ton of fun. Like, yeah, sure, if you wanted to win a tournament, you know, starting off with a net deck is great, but the best part about this game is it offers so much more depth than other games I've played where deck building is concerned, because the way the game functions is you see so much more of your deck in this game. So even the addition of one single card makes a massive difference. So, you know, again, Arena's Prayer, for example, like, if you want to set up this turn where you're preventing and going long and you need a pivot turn, you need a 1-cost card that's going to offer a massive amount of prevention, is like, you don't need 3 copies. You can play just the 1 and you're able to set up these cards. Last Ditch Effort, Remembrance, so on and so forth. Yeah, I would say go out there, experiment, get creative with the deck building. I'm always down to hear any cool stuff you guys are up to, so hit me up in the comments or send me a message on Facebook. Yeah, I'd love to hear some of the cards that you think are sort of being undervalued right now and probably should see more play. And, you know, hit me up if you think some of the cards that I talked about today are just trash and I'm off my nut. Let me know that too. Maybe I should be taking them out of my deck. I don't know. But yeah, thanks for joining me. Many more videos to come, but until then, we'll catch you later.